The mahogany doors of Committee Room 2154 in the Rayburn House office building swung open with a force that made everyone turn. Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary, stood frozen in the doorway, her usually confident demeanor replaced by something nobody had seen before: desperation. Her navy blue suit, typically pressed to perfection, showed subtle wrinkles from what appeared to be a sleepless night. In her trembling hands, she clutched a manila folder that would either save her career or destroy it completely. Across the room, Representative Jasmine Crockett sat at the committee table, her expression carved from stone. The Texas Democrat, known for her fierce courtroom background as a public defender, had just filed an $80 million zero-cents defamation lawsuit that morning, a lawsuit that could end Leavitt's political career before her 28th birthday. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Ms. Crockett," the voice cracked as she spoke, something that had never happened in her hundreds of press briefings. "I need to speak with you." Before this goes any further, the entire room fell silent. C-SPAN cameras were rolling, reporters' fingers hovered over their phones, ready to break the story of the century. What happened next would become the most watched congressional moment in American history, racking up over 50 million views in just 24 hours. But before we dive into what made Karoline Leavitt, the youngest and arguably toughest White House press secretary in history, literally beg her political opponent in front of Congress, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what you're about to witness is political drama at its absolute peak, and trust me, you don't want to miss a second of this story. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, because this showdown is making headlines from Washington to Tokyo. To understand why this moment was so shocking, you need to know who these women are and what brought them to this explosive confrontation. Karoline Leavitt had built her reputation as the iron wall of the Trump administration. At just 27, she'd become the youngest White House press secretary in American history, known for her razor-sharp comebacks and unshakable composure. Born in New Hampshire to a middle-class family, she'd worked her way up from a college intern to the most powerful spokesperson position in government. Her Catholic faith and small-town roots had made her a hero to conservative America. She was the one who'd taken down Hollywood legend Robert De Niro on live TV just months earlier, earning her the nickname the Gen Z Gladiator. Every morning, she'd step up to that podium in the James S. Rady Press briefing room, facing down a hostile press corps with a smile that never cracked. She'd deflected scandals, defended controversial policies, and turned every attack into a counter-offensive. Political insiders called her Trump's secret weapon, a young woman who could connect with voters while demolishing opponents with surgical precision. But Jasmine Crockett was cut from an entirely different cloth. The representative from Texas's 30th district had spent years as a public defender in Dallas, fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. She'd won cases everyone said were impossible, taking on the system and winning. When she entered Congress, she brought that same courtroom intensity to Capitol Hill. Her questioning during committee hearings had become legendary. She didn't just ask questions, she performed legal autopsies on live television. Crockett had grown up in St. Louis, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. She'd earned her law degree through sheer determination and student loans that took a decade to pay off. Where Leavitt represented the polished establishment of the new Republican Party, Crockett embodied the fighting spirit of progressive Democrats who'd come up the hard way. The conflict between them had been building for months. It started with small jabs during press briefings that Crockett attended. Then came the social media exchanges that had millions picking sides. But everything changed 3 days ago when Leavitt made a statement during a Fox News interview that would cost her everything. She'd been discussing immigration policy when the host asked about Crockett's recent border security proposals. Leavitt's response was swift and cutting. Representative Crockett's so-called expertise on border security is about as authentic as her designer handbags. Some people talk about struggling Americans while wearing $3,000 zero-cent suits. That's not representing the people, that's representing yourself. The comment went viral within minutes. But what Leavitt didn't know was that Crockett had been recording everything, building a case that would shock the political world. The designer handbag comment wasn't just an insult. Crockett's team had discovered it was based on a fabricated story planted by a political operative. The bags were gifts from her late grandmother, bought with savings from a lifetime of work as a seamstress. The suits, bought on sale or gifted by supporters who wanted their representative to look professional in Congress. Within 48 hours, Crockett's legal team had filed an $80 million zero-cents defamation lawsuit, citing deliberate malice, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and damage to reputation. The lawsuit didn't just target Leavitt personally. It included the White House Communications Office, Fox News, and 3 major Republican donors who had allegedly coordinated the attack. The stakes couldn't be higher. For Leavitt, this wasn't just about money she didn't have. It was about her entire future. At 27, she could be facing financial ruin, the end of her political career, and the humiliation of being the press secretary who cost the White House millions in a lawsuit. Her mentors were already distancing themselves. Republican donors were asking questions. Even Trump himself had been unusually quiet on Truth Social. For Crockett, this was about more than personal vindication. She'd positioned this as a battle against the politics of personal destruction, a stand against the wealthy and powerful who thought they could say anything about anyone without consequences. Her fundraising had exploded since filing the lawsuit. Progressive organizations were rallying behind her. She was scheduled for primetime interviews on every major network. But there was something else at play. Something that made this confrontation even more explosive. Unknown to the public, both women had received information about each other that could destroy careers. Leavitt had documents suggesting Crockett had made questionable financial decisions during her time as a public defender. Crockett had recordings of Leavitt from her college days that contradicted her carefully crafted public image. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It was mutually assured destruction, and both women knew it. The question was who would blink first. The committee room atmosphere was electric as Leavitt took 3 hesitant steps forward. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. The usual confident stride that had carried her through hundreds of press briefings was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like a death march. "Miss Crockett," Leavitt repeated, her voice stronger this time, but still carrying an edge of something desperate. "I know you have every reason not to listen to me, but there are things, important things, that we need to discuss before this goes any further." Crockett didn't move. She sat at the committee table like a judge at a bench, her dark eyes fixed on Leavitt with an intensity that could melt steel. She was wearing a deep purple suit, the color of royalty, of power, of someone who held all the cards and knew it. Her silence was deliberate, calculated, forcing Leavitt to fill the void. "I know what I said was wrong," Leavitt continued, moving closer to the table. The clicking of her heels on the marble floor echoed through the silent room. "But this lawsuit? $80 million, 0 cents. You're not just coming after me. You're coming after people who had nothing to do with my comments. Staff members with families. People who what?" Crockett's voice cut through the room like a blade. It was the first time she'd spoken, and the power in her tone made several people in the gallery flinch. "People who thought they could destroy my reputation for political points? People who thought a black woman from St. Louis wouldn't fight back?" Yep. The racial dimension landed like a bomb. Everyone knew it had been simmering under the surface, but Crockett had just brought it into the light. Leavitt's face flushed. Whether from anger or embarrassment, nobody could tell. "That's not what this was about," Leavitt protested, her hands gripping the folder tighter. "You know that's not—" "I know exactly what this was about." Crockett stood up slowly, deliberately, like a predator that had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "You thought you could take shots at me because I'm an easy target, the angry black woman, right? The one who doesn't belong in your refined political world?" "Is absolutely not." "Then what was it about, Ms. Levy?" Crockett stepped around the table, closing the distance between them. "Please, enlighten this committee. Tell us why you felt the need to lie about my grandmother's gifts. Tell us why you had to invent stories about my clothes. Tell us why the youngest press secretary in history decided to punch down at a freshman congresswoman." The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Leavitt's usual armor of quick comebacks and deflections had completely failed her. For the first time in her political career, she looked exactly like what she was, a 27-year-old who had gotten in way over her head. "I have information," Leavitt said suddenly, lifting the manila folder slightly. "Information that I think you need to see before—" "Is that a threat?" Crockett's voice went cold, deadly cold. Are you standing in front of this committee, in front of these cameras, trying to blackmail me? No, Leavitt's response was immediate, panicked. No, that's not. I'm trying to explain that this situation is more complicated than... Complicated? Crockett laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me uncomplicate it for you. You lied, you got caught, now you're going to pay. That's not complicated, that's consequences. Representative Jim Jordan, the committee chairman, finally intervened. Ladies, perhaps we should, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman. Crockett didn't even look at him, her eyes still locked on Leavitt. Ms. Leavitt came here uninvited. If she has something to say, let her say it, in front of everyone. No backroom deals, no secret negotiations. If she wants to beg, let her beg in the light. The word beg hung in the air like a challenge. Leavitt's jaw tightened, and for a moment the old fire flickered in her eyes. This was the woman who had faced down the entire White House press corps every day, who had made seasoned journalists look like amateurs. But that fire died as quickly as it had appeared. Fine, Leavitt said, her voice barely above a whisper. You want me to beg? In front of everyone? She took a deep breath, and then, in a move that shocked everyone, including her own staff, Karoline Leavitt did something unprecedented for a White House press secretary. She got down on her knees. The room exploded. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. Reporters jumped to their feet. Someone in the gallery gasped so loudly it echoed off the walls. But Leavitt stayed there, on her knees, looking up at Jasmine Crockett, with tears starting to form in her eyes. Please, Leavitt said, her voice breaking. I'm begging you. Drop the lawsuit. Not for me. I deserve whatever you want to throw at me. But there are innocent people who will be destroyed by this. Sarah Martinez, the intern who's only been with us 3 weeks, she's named in your filing. She's 22, first in her family to graduate college. Tom Bradley, the communications assistant, he's got a daughter with special needs. The insurance from this job is the only thing keeping her in therapy. These people didn't make my comments. They don't deserve to lose everything because of my mistake. Crockett stood frozen, clearly not expecting this. The power dynamic had shifted in a way nobody had anticipated. The mighty press secretary on her knees, the freshman congresswoman standing over her. It was an image that would define both their careers. Get up, Crockett said quietly. Not until you get up. The command in Crockett's voice was absolute. You don't get to do this. You don't get to humiliate yourself and make me look like the villain. Stand up right now, or I walk out and we let the lawyers handle everything. Leavitt slowly rose to her feet, her knees shaking. Tears were now flowing freely down her face, ruining the makeup that had been perfectly applied just an hour ago. The folder in her hands was crumpled from where she'd been gripping it. You want to know what's really pathetic? Crockett asked, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. It's not you on your knees. It's the fact that you only care about consequences when they affect you. Where was this concern for innocent people when you were spreading lies about me? Where was this humanity when you were trying to destroy my reputation? I was doing my job, Leavitt said weakly. Your job? Crockett's voice rose for the first time. Your job is to lie about people's grandmothers? Your job is to mock someone's family heritage? Your job is to weaponize poverty shame against someone who actually lived it? The committee room had become an arena, and everyone present knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. The young press secretary, who had seemed invincible, was being systematically dismantled by a freshman congresswoman who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. You have no idea what you've done, Crockett continued, her voice dropping back to that cold, controlled tone that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. My grandmother worked her fingers bloody in a factory for 40 years. She saved every penny to buy me nice things, to make sure I could walk into any room and belong there. And you turned that into a punchline. You turned her love into a liability. Leavitt opened her mouth to respond, but Crockett held up a hand. I'm not finished. You see, Miss Leavitt, you and I are actually very similar. We're both young women trying to make it in a world that's constantly telling us we don't belong. The difference is, I punch up. You punch down. I fight systems. You fight people. And that's why you're standing here destroyed by your own words while I'm about to become $80 million 0 cents richer. Please, Leavitt tried one more time. The folder. There's information about the real source of those talking points. I didn't create them. They came from... From who? Crockett demanded. Who told you to attack me? Who gave you the script? Leavitt glanced around the room. Clearly torn, everyone leaned forward. This was it. The moment where she would either save herself by throwing someone else under the bus or go down with the ship. Steve Hoffman, she said finally. Senior advisor Steve Hoffman. He wrote the talking points. He did the opposition research. He told me to use it during the Fox interview. Another explosion of noise. Steve Hoffman was one of Trump's closest advisors, a man who had been with him since the first campaign. If Leavitt was telling the truth, this scandal went all the way to the top. And you have proof of this? Crockett asked, eyeing the folder. Emails, text messages, even a recorded phone call where he explicitly tells me to destroy you before you could gain more influence. Crockett was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. The room held its breath. Give me the folder, she said finally. Leavitt handed it over with shaking hands. Crockett opened it, quickly scanning the contents. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted slightly. This is interesting, Crockett said slowly. But it doesn't change what you did. You could have said no. You could have refused. You chose to be his weapon. I know, Leavitt said, the fight completely gone from her voice. I know I did, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But please, don't punish innocent people for my choices. Crockett closed the folder and looked at Leavitt for a long moment. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her decision. What happened next would become the most replayed moment in congressional history. Jasmine Crockett slowly walked around Karoline Leavitt like a prosecutor circling a witness. The click of her heels on marble created a rhythm that seemed to match everyone's heartbeat. You know what your problem is, Ms. Leavitt? Crockett asked, her voice carrying perfect clarity to every corner of the room. You've never faced real consequences. You've lived your entire life in a bubble where apologizing makes everything go away, where tears equal forgiveness, where being young and blonde and sorry is enough. Leavitt flinched at each word but didn't respond. Her mascara had run, creating dark streams down her cheeks that photographers would later say made her look like a broken doll. But I grew up different, Crockett continued. Where I come from, actions have consequences. Real ones. The kind that don't go away because you cry about them. My mother couldn't cry her way out of an eviction notice. My grandmother couldn't beg her way into a job that paid fair wages. We had to fight for everything. And we learned that when someone comes for you, you don't just defend, you destroy. Representative Jordan tried to interject again. Mr. Crockett, perhaps we should take a recess. No recess, Crockett snapped, not breaking eye contact with Leavitt. She wanted this public. She came here, to this committee room, knowing cameras were rolling. She wanted the spectacle. Well, she's got it. Crockett opened the folder again, pulling out one of the documents. Let's read what your mentor, Steve Hoffman, really thinks about you, shall we? This is from an email dated 2 weeks ago. She cleared her throat and read, Leavitt is useful for now, young, ambitious, and dumb enough to take the fall when needed. Keep her in front of the cameras. If things go south, she's expendable. The color drained from Leavitt's face completely. She looked like she might faint. Expendable, Crockett repeated. That's what you are to them. A pretty face to take the bullets while they hide in their offices. And you were so eager to please them that you didn't even see it. That's not... Steve wouldn't... Leavitt's... Protest died as Crockett pulled out another document. Here's another one. This is from a text message thread between Hoffman and donor Richard Blackstone. The Crockett hit is perfect for Leavitt. If it works, we take credit. If it backfires, she takes the fall. Win-win. The betrayal on Leavitt's face was complete. She sank into a nearby chair, all strength gone from her legs. You see, Ms. Leavitt, while you were attacking me for things that weren't even true, the men you were protecting were planning your disposal. While you were on your knees begging me for mercy, they're probably in their offices right now drafting your resignation letter. As if on cue, Leavitt's phone buzzed. She looked at it with trembling hands. Her face, already pale, went absolutely white. Let me guess, Crockett said. The White House wants to see you immediately? Leavitt nodded, unable to speak. They're going to fire you, Crockett stated matter-of-factly. They're going to make you the scapegoat for this entire mess. And you know what the really sad part is? You're going to let them. You're going to walk out of here, go to that meeting, and accept whatever they tell you to accept. Because that's what good soldiers do, right? I don't have a choice, Leavitt whispered. You always had a choice. Crockett's voice rose to a thunderous level. You chose to attack me. You chose to be their puppet. And now you want sympathy because the strings got cut? The room was absolutely silent except for the sound of Leavitt's quiet sobbing. But here's what's going to happen now, Crockett said, her voice dropping back to that controlled, lethal tone. I'm not dropping the lawsuit. In fact, after seeing these documents, I'm adding Steve Hoffman and Richard Blackstone as defendants. The amount stays at $80 million, 0 cents. Gasps echoed through the room. Adding those names meant this was no longer just about Leavitt. It was about the entire power structure of the current administration. You can't. They'll destroy you, Leavitt said, looking up with genuine fear in her eyes. You don't know what they're capable of. No, Crockett said with a cold smile. They don't know what I'm capable of. See, unlike you, I didn't get here by being someone's puppet. I got here by being a fighter, and I've got something you never had. Nothing to lose and everything to gain. Crockett turned to address the room at large, knowing every word would be broadcast across the nation within minutes. Let this be a lesson to everyone watching. The days of destroying people's reputations for political sport are over. The days of using young staffers as cannon fodder are over. You come for me or anyone else with lies and manipulation, and we will come back with lawyers and lawsuits. We will hit you where it really hurts. Your bank accounts. She turned back to Leavitt, who was now openly weeping. But I'm not completely heartless. You mentioned Sarah Martinez and Tom Bradley. The innocent staffers, I'll make you a deal. One-time offer. Non-negotiable. Leavitt looked up, a spark of hope in her tear-grilled eyes. You testify, Crockett said simply. Under oath. In court. About everything. Every dirty trick, every lie, every backdoor deal. You tell the truth about Hoffman, Blackstone, and anyone else involved in this smear campaign. You do that, and I'll remove the staffers from the lawsuit. They walk away clean. They'll destroy me, Leavitt whispered. My career, my future, everything will be gone. Your career is already over, Crockett said bluntly. Check Twitter. You're trending nationwide. Press secretary meltdown. Leavitt on her knees, White House humiliation. Your career died the moment you walked into this room. Leavitt pulled out her phone with shaking hands, her face crumpled as she saw the headlines. The memes already spreading, the video clips of her on her knees going viral. But here's the thing about destruction, Crockett continued, her voice taking on an almost gentle tone. Sometimes it's necessary for rebuilding. You testify, you tell the truth, and yeah, your political career is over. But you get to walk away with something more valuable, your integrity. You get to be the one who finally stood up to them. You get to be remembered as the one who chose truth over power. Or, Crockett's voice hardened again, you stay loyal to people who already called you expendable. You take the fall alone, and you spend the next 20 years paying off a legal judgment that will follow you for the rest of your life. Your choice. The committee room was dead silent. Everyone present knew they were witnessing a historic moment, the complete dismantling of a political operative in real time. Leavitt sat there, tears streaming down her face, her phone buzzing repeatedly with what everyone assumed were increasingly frantic messages from the White House. I need time to think, Leavitt said finally. You have until 5 p.m. today, Crockett said, checking her watch. That's 6 hours. After that, the offer disappears and we go to war. Full scorched earth, no survivors. That's not enough time. It's more than you gave me, Crockett cut her off. When you went on Fox News and destroyed my reputation, I didn't get any warning. I found out when my mother called me crying because someone had spray-painted fraud on her house. So 6 hours is generous. Crockett gathered the documents from the folder, keeping them for evidence. And Ms. Leavitt, if you're thinking about warning Hoffman or trying to coordinate stories, remember, I have copies of everything. Every email, every text, every recorded conversation you just gave me. You try to play games, and I release everything to the press immediately. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. You know what the saddest part of all this is? We could have been allies. 2 young women breaking barriers, changing the game. Instead, you chose to be their weapon against me. And now look where we are. Crockett walked toward the door, her heels clicking with authority. At the threshold, she turned back one more time. 6 hours, Ms. Leavitt. Choose wisely. For once in your life, choose something other than power. With that, she was gone, leaving Karoline Leavitt sitting in the committee room, surrounded by reporters and cameras, completely and utterly destroyed. The young woman who had started the day as the White House press secretary, the most powerful spokesperson in government, was now nothing more than collateral damage in a war she never should have started. Chairman Jordan finally spoke, his voice uncertain. I think we should recess." But nobody moved. Everyone was watching Leavitt, waiting to see what she would do. She sat there for another full minute, tears flowing silently, before finally standing on unsteady legs. "Miss Leavitt," a reporter called out, "do you have any comment? Will you take the deal?" Leavitt looked at the reporter, then at the cameras, then at the door where Crockett had exited. When she spoke, her voice was hollow, defeated, but carried a note of something else, maybe determination, maybe just exhaustion. "I've been expendable since day one," she said quietly. "I just didn't know it until now." She walked out of the room, her heels clicking much more softly than Crockett's had, the sound of someone who had lost everything and was only now realizing she never had anything to begin with. The aftermath was immediate and brutal. Within minutes, expendable press was trending worldwide. The video of Leavitt on her knees begging Crockett had been viewed over 10 million times in the first hour. News networks cleared their schedules for special coverage. Political commentators who had spent years analyzing Leavitt's performances were now dissecting her downfall. At the White House, chaos reigned. Steve Hoffman was reportedly in emergency meetings with legal counsel. Richard Blackstone had released a statement denying any involvement, but reporters were already digging into his financial connections to the administration. The press briefing room, where Leavitt had commanded attention just 24 hours ago, stood empty. No one knew who would take the podium now. But the real drama was just beginning, because Karoline Leavitt had 6 hours to make the most important decision of her life: stay loyal to people who betrayed her, or burn down the entire system that had used and discarded her. The clock was ticking. 4 hours and 37 minutes after leaving the committee room, Karoline Leavitt sat in her small apartment in Arlington, Virginia, staring at 2 phones on her coffee table. One was ringing non-stop: the White House, Steve Hoffman, Republican donors, everyone who wanted to control what happened next. The other was silent. The burner phone Jasmine Crockett's lawyer had given her, waiting for her decision. Her apartment, once a symbol of her success, now felt like a prison. The walls were covered with photos from her political rise, shaking hands with Trump, her first day as press secretary, victory celebrations from various campaigns. Each image now seemed to mock her, reminders of a career built on loyalty to people who saw her as disposable. The TV was on, muted, but she could see her face on every channel. CNN had a countdown clock. Leavitt decision, 1 second, 23 seconds remaining. Fox News, the network that had been her safe space, was already distancing themselves with headlines like "Press Secretary's Meltdown Raises Questions About White House Judgment." Her personal phone buzzed, a text from her mother in New Hampshire. "Honey, whatever they're telling you to do, remember, your father and I raised you to tell the truth." The truth. Such a simple concept that had become so complicated in Washington. Her laptop was open to Twitter, where the destruction of her reputation continued in real time. Someone had made a meme of her on her knees with the caption, "When you realize you were the swamp all along." It had 200,000 retweets. Another showed her face photoshopped onto a puppet, with Hoffman pulling the strings. Even accounts that had supported her for years were turning against her. But buried in the noise were other messages. Women sharing stories of being thrown under the bus by powerful men. Young staffers talking about similar experiences of being used and discarded. A hashtag had emerged, Expendable Generation, highlighting how many young people had been chewed up and spit out by political machines on both sides. The White House phone rang again. This time she answered. "Karoline." Steve Hoffman's voice was ice cold. "You need to come in, now. I have 2 hours left to make my decision," she said. surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "There is no decision. You're going to refuse her offer, take responsibility for your actions, and resign gracefully. The president will ensure you land somewhere comfortable, maybe a contributor role at Fox, maybe a think tank position. But only if you play ball." "And if I don't?" The silence on the other end was deafening. When Hoffman spoke again, his voice had dropped to a menacing whisper. "Then you'll never work in politics again. You'll never work in media. You'll be radioactive. Every door will close. Every opportunity will disappear. You think you're destroyed now? You have no idea what we can do to you." "Like what you're already doing?" Leavitt asked. "I saw the emails, Steve. I know you called me expendable. Everyone is expendable, Karoline. That's how this works. You knew that when you signed up." "No," she said quietly. "I thought we were a team. I thought loyalty meant something." Hoffman laughed, a harsh sound that made her flinch. "Loyalty goes up, not down. You're loyal to us. We use you as needed. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. Then, the deal's off." She hung up before he could respond. The burner phone immediately rang. She stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Miss Leavitt?" The voice was Crockett's lawyer. "We need your decision soon. The Congresswoman is prepared to move forward either way." "I want to add a condition," Leavitt said. The Congresswoman was clear. "Just hear me out. I'll testify. I'll tell everything. But I want immunity for every staffer below senior level, not just Sarah and Tom. Everyone who's going to get caught in this crossfire. They're all expendable to these people. They all deserve protection." There was a pause. "I'll need to consult with my client. Can you hold?" The minutes stretched like hours. Outside her window, she could see news vans starting to gather. Someone had leaked her address. The vultures were circling. The lawyer came back on. "The Congresswoman agrees, with one addition. You testify publicly, not just in court, in front of Congress, televised. The American people deserve to hear the truth about how this administration operates. Public testimony, career suicide broadcast live to the nation. But then again, her career was already dead." "Deal," she said. "We'll send a car in 30 minutes. Bring any additional evidence you have." Leavitt hung up and immediately went to her safe. Inside were USB drives, printed emails, and recordings she'd made secretly over the past year, insurance she'd hoped never to use. Her hands shook as she gathered everything into a briefcase. Her White House phone exploded with calls and texts. She turned it off and threw it in a drawer. 28 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside. As she walked to it, reporters swarmed. "Karoline, are you taking the deal?" "Miss Leavitt, is it true you have evidence against senior administration officials? Will you be testifying against the president?" She said nothing, sliding into the SUV as cameras flashed like lightning. As they drove away, she saw Steve Hoffman on the TV screen in the car, already at a podium, already spinning. "Miss Dobe, Leavitt's recent behavior has raised serious concerns about her mental stability," he was saying. "We're recommending she seek professional help. The administration will not be commenting further on the fantasies of a disturbed former employee. She'd been fired via television, the final humiliation, or so they thought." 1 hour later, Karoline Leavitt walked into Jasmine Crockett's congressional office. The Congresswoman was waiting, still in the same purple suit, still radiating the same controlled power. "You made the right choice," Crockett said simply. "Did I?" Leavitt asked, sinking into a chair. "I just destroyed my entire life." "No, they destroyed your life the moment they decided you were expendable. You're just choosing to take some of them down with you." Leavitt pulled out the briefcase, setting it on the desk. "Everything's in here. Emails, recordings, financial documents. It goes deeper than you know. It's not just about the attack on you. There's a whole system. Opposition research funded by dark money, coordinated smear campaigns, journalists on the payroll. Your situation was just one small part." Crockett opened the briefcase, her eyes widening as she saw the extent of the evidence. This is enough to bring down half the administration." "That's the point," Leavitt said. "If I'm going to burn, they burn with me." For the first time since their confrontation, Crockett looked at her with something approaching respect. "You know they'll come after you hard. This is declaring war on some of the most powerful people in the country. They already declared war on me when they made me expendable. I'm just fighting back." Crockett nodded slowly. "The testimony is scheduled for tomorrow. House Oversight Committee, 10 a.m. It'll be the most watched congressional testimony since Watergate." "I'll be ready." "Are you sure? Once you do this, there's no going back." Leavitt thought about all the times she'd stood at that podium, defending policies she didn't believe in, attacking people who didn't deserve it, all for the approval of men who saw her as a tool to be used and discarded. "I've been going back my entire career," she said. "It's time to move forward." The next morning, Committee Room 2154 was packed beyond capacity. Every major news outlet in the world was there. The gallery was full of congressional staffers, journalists, and citizens who'd lined up since 4 a.m. to witness history. Karoline Leavitt entered wearing a simple black suit, funeral attire for her political career. She carried no notes, no prepared statement. Everything she needed to say was burned into her memory. As she sat down at the witness table, she saw them all. Steve Hoffman in the back, trying to look unconcerned but sweating through his suit. Richard Blackstone's lawyers frantically texting. Republican representatives who had once been her allies, now looking at her like she was a bomb about to explode. And in the front row of the committee, Jasmine Crockett, who gave her the slightest nod. Not forgiveness. They would never be friends, but acknowledgement. Warrior to warrior. Committee Chairman Jim Jordan gavelled the hearing to order, his face grave. "Ms. Leavitt, you understand you're under oath?" "I do." "And you're here voluntarily?" "I am." "Please begin your testimony." Leavitt leaned into the microphone. Across America, millions leaned toward their screens. "My name is Karoline Leavitt. Until yesterday, I was the White House press secretary. I'm here to tell you the truth about how your government really works, how information is weaponized, and how people like me are used to destroy anyone who threatens the powerful." She paused, looking directly at the cameras. "I'm here to name names, provide evidence, and accept responsibility for my part in a system that values loyalty over truth, power over people, and winning over everything. I'm 27 years old, and I've already done more damage to innocent people than I can ever repair. But maybe, by telling the truth now, I can prevent others from making my mistakes." The committee room was dead silent. Let's start with the attack on Congresswoman Crockett. It wasn't my idea. It wasn't even Steve Hoffman's idea, though he delivered the orders. It came from a donor meeting 3 weeks ago, where Richard Blackstone and 6 other major contributors decided that Congresswoman Crockett was becoming too influential, too dangerous to their interests. They paid $2.00, $3 million, to an opposition research firm called Digital Fortress to create a dossier of attacks. The handbag story, the designer suits, all fabricated. Gasps rippled through the room. Hoffman stood up to leave, but Capitol Police at the doors stopped him. He was trapped. "I have recordings," Leavitt continued, pulling out a phone. "This is from a call 2 weeks ago." She pressed play. Hoffman's voice filled the room. "Make sure Leavitt uses the personal attacks. If she pushes back, remind her she's replaceable. We have a dozen blonde conservatives who can stand at that podium." The recording continued, each word more damaging than the last. By the time it finished, 3 congressmen had walked out, and Hoffman looked like he might vomit. "But this goes beyond just one attack," Leavitt continued. "There's an entire network. Journalists who are paid to push certain stories, congressional staffers who leak information for cash, social media influencers who receive talking points every morning at 6 a.m. She pulled out a printed spreadsheet. "This is a list of every media personality receiving payments from shell companies connected to the administration. The amounts will shock you. Tucker Harrison at Nation First News at $3.02, $2 million last year. Rebecca Martinez at the Patriot Post, $1.00, $8 million, even some you'd never suspect. Michael Chen at the Independent Journal, $750,000, 0 cents, to occasionally insert approved narratives into his otherwise critical coverage." The room erupted. Reporters were frantically typing, calling their editors. This was beyond anything anyone had expected. "How do I know all this?" Leavitt asked. "Because I was the one who delivered the payments. I was the one who coordinated the attacks. I was the one who stood at that podium every day and lied to your faces." She looked directly at Jasmine Crockett. "Congresswoman, What I did to you was unforgivable. I attacked your character, your family, your heritage, all because powerful men told me to. I chose careerism over conscience. I chose access over integrity, and I will pay for that for the rest of my life." Then she turned back to the committee. But I wasn't alone. Every single person in this administration knows this is happening. Every senator taking donor money knows there are strings attached. Every representative who repeats talking points knows where they come from. We're all complicit. The only difference is, I'm the only one telling you about it. For the next 4 hours, Leavitt laid out everything. Financial crimes, campaign finance violations, coordinated disinformation campaigns, even potential foreign influence through undisclosed intermediaries. She provided documents, played recordings, and named every single person involved. By the time she finished, Washington was in chaos. The Attorney General had announced an immediate investigation. 3 senior advisors had resigned. Steve Hoffman had been escorted from the Capitol by federal agents. Richard Blackstone's assets had been frozen pending investigation. As Leavitt stood to leave, exhausted and drained, Jasmine Crockett approached her. "That took courage," Crockett said quietly. "No," Leavitt replied. "Courage would have been saying no in the first place. This is just damage control." "Still, you could have stayed silent, taken the think tank job, disappeared quietly, and let them do this to someone else? Let them use another 27-year-old idealist as their weapon?" Leavitt shook her head. "I may be expendable to them, but my conscience isn't expendable to me." Crockett extended her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Leavitt shook it. "The lawsuit?" Leavitt asked. "Withdrawn against you and all staffers below senior level, but Hoffman, Blackstone, and the others? They're going to pay every penny." Leavitt nodded. "Good. They can afford it." As she walked out of the committee room, reporters swarmed again. "Ms. Leavitt, what's next for you? Karoline, do you regret your testimony? Will you write a book?" She stopped at the door and turned to face them one last time. "I'm done being anyone's spokesperson," she said. "I'm done being expendable. I'm done being a weapon. I'm 27 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm going to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to please powerful people." "But what will you do?" a reporter pressed. Leavitt thought about it for a moment, then almost smiled. "Tell the truth. It's a new experience for me, but I think I might get used to it." She walked out into the Washington sunlight, unemployed, politically radioactive, and facing an uncertain future. But for the first time in years, she felt something she'd forgotten existed: freedom. Behind her, the committee room erupted in chaos as members demanded more investigations, more testimony, more blood. The machine she'd been part of was eating itself alive, and she'd lit the match. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Jasmine. What you did today doesn't erase what you did to me, but it's a start. Good luck figuring out who you really are." Leavitt deleted the message, then deleted all her political contacts, all her Washington connections, everyone who had been part of her old life. It was time to start over. As she walked away from the Capitol, she passed a group of young interns, bright-eyed and eager, heading to their first day on the Hill. She wanted to warn them, to tell them about the machine they were about to enter, the compromises they'd be asked to make, the person they'd become if they stayed too long. But she didn't. They'd have to learn for themselves, just like she had. All she could do was hope that when their moment came, when they were asked to destroy someone for political gain, they'd be stronger than she had been. The headline in the Washington Post the next day read, "The Expendable Generation: How Karoline Leavitt Exposed Washington's Dirtiest Secret." The subtitle, "At 27, she destroyed her career to reveal the truth." The question now, how many others will follow? Within a week, 12 more young staffers had come forward with similar stories. Within a month, the investigation had expanded to include both parties, multiple administrations, and dozens of media organizations. The system that had created and destroyed Karoline Leavitt was finally being exposed to the light. But Leavitt herself was gone. She'd returned to New Hampshire, to her parents' house, to figure out what came next. Her political career was over. Her reputation in Washington destroyed. But sometimes destruction is just another word for liberation. The $80 million 0-cents lawsuit against Hoffman, Blackstone, and the others would eventually be settled for $45 million 0 cents, with the money going to fund journalism ethics programs and support whistleblowers. Jasmine Crockett would go on to become one of the most powerful voices in Congress, her reputation enhanced by how she'd handled the situation. And Karoline Leavitt, she would disappear from public life for 2 years before re-emerging as an advocate for government transparency and ethical reform. Her book, Expendable: My Journey from Secretary to Truth Teller, would become a bestseller and required reading in political science programs. But that was all in the future. In this moment, as she sat in her childhood bedroom looking at the photo from her first day as press secretary, all she felt was relief. The weight of all those lies, all those compromises, all those attacks on innocent people, it was finally gone. She'd beg Jasmine Crockett to drop the lawsuit and receive something more valuable than mercy. She'd receive the push she needed to finally tell the truth. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't standing up to your enemies, it's standing up to the people you once called friends. And sometimes being expendable is the first step to becoming essential, not to a political machine, but to yourself. 2 years later, Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt would meet again, this time at a conference on political reform at Harvard. They weren't friends. Too much damage had been done for that, but they were no longer enemies. "You look different," Crockett observed, "healthier." "Amazing what happens when you stop lying for a living," Leavitt replied. "Any regrets?" "We've thought about it every day, but not about the testimony, about everything that came before it." "We all have those," Crockett said, surprising her. "Things we did to get ahead, people we stepped on. The difference is what we do once we realize it." They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Crockett spoke again. "Your testimony changed things, you know that, right? The whole culture shifted. Young staffers aren't as willing to be weapons anymore." "One person telling the truth doesn't change a system," Leavitt said. "No, but it can start an avalanche, and you started something." As they parted ways, unlikely allies in reforming a broken system, both women knew the truth. Power corrupts, but accountability can redeem. And sometimes it takes someone on their knees to show everyone else how to stand up. The last image would become iconic. 2 young women who had destroyed each other's lives, walking in opposite directions, both headed toward different futures, but united by one shared understanding. The truth, however painful, is always better than a comfortable lie. And that's the real story of how Karoline Leavitt begged Jasmine Crockett to drop an $80 million 0 cents lawsuit, and how Crockett's cold response didn't just shock Congress, it exposed the entire rotten foundation of political Washington. If you found this political expose compelling, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. The political establishment doesn't want you to know these stories, but we're here to bring you the truth no matter how shocking. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Did Leavitt do the right thing by testifying? Should Crockett have shown mercy? And what do you think happens next in Washington after these revelations? Like this video if you believe in transparency in government, and share it with everyone who needs to know how the political machine really works. We'll see you in the next video, where we dive even deeper into the scandals rocking the Capitol. Stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop questioning those in power.